Hello, everyone. My name is Katie McDonald. I use pronouns she, her, and I'm a community engaged researcher working on the Resiliency for Affordable Housing research project with Savita. Today, I'm going to take you through a little bit of an activity workshop to think about how organizational resiliency can be built and encouraged through communication. And so one of the ways that we know resilient organizations encourage resiliency is through really offering opportunities for contribution, specifically through communication. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Okay. So what do we mean by encouraging contribution through communication? So we know that when one's basic underlying needs for security are met in their job, such as fair pay, compensation, etc., resilient organizations are full of employees who give 110% to the organization. This motivation does not simply come because they have been promised extra rewards. It manifests because they truly enjoy the work that they do. And this is something we see in the nonprofit and the for-purpose sector, that people are really committed to the vision and the mission of the organization that they're a part of. You may think that this is just the personalities of the employees that determine their motivations, that they're born with the trait, but that's not the case. Actually, in the research, we see that resilient organizations do a very excellent job at motivating their employees to contribute to the organization by focusing on 3 key basic needs when they're communicating with them. And we'll go through those needs right now. So the first need that is focused on when organizations are trying to encourage contribution through communication for resiliency is instilling a sense of belonging, of relatedness, connectedness, and acceptance with each other and to the organization. Everyone in the organization supports and respects each other. Of course, this doesn't mean that there will never be disagreements or that people may not, be on the same page, but it means that when those disagreements happen, they happen with respect, and that everyone is sort of with their eyes on the vision or the mission of the organization. The second key basic need that organizations use when they're communicating with their employees is autonomy. So they give their employees a sense of control and of choice. They know that when their employees are told exactly what to do each day, what time, etc., that they shut down emotionally and they disengage from work. So this is kind of the micromanaging feeling of not being trusted, of not having a sense of control, and of being, just kind of watched the whole time. Choice creates a productive workforce. And then the third key piece when encouraging contribution is competence. So organizations communicate with their employees in a way that instills a sense of competence and skill. They also encourage employees to learn from their experience, and employees in resilient organizations are always learning and growing. So this workshop, this video, is an excellent example of how organizations can contribute to the development of their staff. And each of these 3 key tenets of communication are, of course, interrelated to one another, and they show up together. They're not easy to kind of parse out in between one another. Okay, so what are some ways the organization can communicate with you to increase relatedness or sense of belonging at work? An example from the research is that managers and colleagues choose to get to know you. So developing that kind of relationship, knowing who the staff member is, not only their work. I'll encourage you now to pause the video and either brainstorm on your own, or if you're with other people, to brainstorm together of some other ways to increase relatedness or sense of belonging. And then I'll share some other examples. Okay, I'll assume you're back from pausing. So some of the other examples that we have seen in the research and in conducting this workshop has been that an employee contribution is valued. And so that can happen in many different ways, but to really recognize that employees are bringing something to the organization and that it's valued, whether that's on a one-on-one, a team level, or an organizational level, depends on the staff member and the organization, but that there is that valuing of their contribution. This can also happen in a kind of everyday interaction, right? Like, thank you for that work you did. We really appreciate it. Or, this project wouldn't have happened without the work of so-and-so. Ideas are accepted. This doesn't necessarily mean that every idea is implemented, but that ideas are welcomed, they're encouraged, and that they're accepted as a part of the development of solutions to problems. Okay, What are some ways the organization can communicate with you to increase autonomy? And again, I'll ask you to pause and brainstorm or chat with your colleagues, and then I'll continue with some of the ones that we know from research on the workshops. Okay, so some of what we know is that organizations can communicate in ways to increase autonomy by encouraging people to choose how to do their job or related tasks. So again, not that kind of micromanagey approach, but allowing people to really make decisions about the how or the when, or in what way they complete their tasks. So this is your workload and you get it done, that kind of trust piece. They ask for your input on new processes or changes. So again, coming back to that piece of saying like, okay, this is what we're thinking of changing. What does that look like to you? Or this is a process you've been involved in for a while. Do you think it needs changes? When you provide input, that input is acted upon. So it's reviewed, it's evaluated, it's shared with other people. It doesn't, again, necessarily mean that it's implemented, but that it's seen as valid and important and a legitimate input in the process. Remember, sometimes when we're inviting input, there could be 3 different ideas that all contradict one another, right? So even developing that process of determining which idea or solution fits best could be a team process. Employees are involved in decision making. Okay, now what are some ways that an organization can communicate with you to increase and promote competence? Again, I'll encourage you to sort of brainstorm on your own or pause and discuss with your colleagues here. So some of the ways that we have witnessed this in the research or that we've seen it in workshops is that feedback is regularly provided in a clear, confidential, and non-judgmental manner. So this means, it's on a one-on-one, it's constructive criticism, and that's always with the view of sort of uplifting and encouraging the employee. Professional development is provided and encouraged. Again, this workshop is a great example of that, but it could be other examples too, and it may not just be organizationally provided, but something a staff member seeks out and requests permission to attend, for example. Good work is recognized in a personal and deliberate way. So again, we can see some of these like echoing throughout all 3, right? So the value of people is recognized, good work is recognized. So it's that recognition, connection piece. Employees are challenged, so making sure that people's work is a challenge for them, it's exciting, it's helping them grow. And finally, that they're in a role that shows their strengths. And something that might be really helpful for you to do on your own is to reflect on how you personally want to be encouraged at work, because this is a really personal thing that relates to, how we grew up and our ideas about where we want to be recognized, if we're more introverted or extroverted. And so this might be a really good conversation to have in your team or with your supervisor to say, I think for me to feel really competent, or for me to feel belonging, it would be important for my work to be recognized at an individual level, not the team level, because that embarrasses me. So to really be able to articulate what it means for you to feel like your contributions are recognized and encouraged, and then to be able to have that conversation one-on-one. And so we've seen in this short presentation that it's really important to think about how our communication with our employees, whether that's from leadership to staff or between staff or on teams, is really central in promoting organizational resiliency. So it's not only through policies and procedures, but through the everyday culture that we have in our organization and the way that we speak with one another. So I'd encourage you to meet with your team, to meet with your organization, even with your supervisor, and to talk about what is the culture of communication and how can it be improved to reflect what we know are some resilient strategies in communication. Okay, thank you so much, and I hope you've enjoyed this session.